Yerp. That's my new thing now. I'm gonna start everything like that. Yerp. What up? What up? It's Mad King and Yerp. And Fleece Cat. And you're on mute. You start. That's another tradition. She starts on mute, and there's police sirens. Those are her two things.
Hi, Fleece Cat. Meow.
All right. Meow. There you go. You're meow. That should be the name of our new podcast. You're meow podcast.
Gamerish Network. All those cat games they pop up.
Was any of those worth mentioning or anything you remember?
I don't know their name. They're all one game in my head.
They are cute. Yeah, they're all one game. They're all cute.
It actually made me go to the PlayStation Store. I didn't get to the demo yet for Final Fantasy, but I went to the PlayStation Store today, and I spent a bunch of money on $1 games, and one of them was Cat Quest. I got the sequel. It's two plays. It's going.
Oh, so you got to go the whole. You got a whole library coming out for this.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm still here. I know we're starting soon.
All right, go ahead, do your thing. Dre be jumping in a little bit later. Another all-day event of Gamerish Network, E3 week, E3 month, just everything. So we got Take-Two right off the bat right now, and then we got indie games. And after that, I believe we have Capcom. So yeah, we have a lot of games, a lot of stuff. Trying to bring the people what they want, what they ask for. You know what I'm saying? It says starting soon. It said we're supposed to start. There you go. Let's say it's supposed to already start. E3 exclusive. Let's put the music on so you guys can hear it. Take-Two. I'm expecting a lot from Take-Two.
I'm Alan Lewis, Vice President of Corporate Communications for Interactive. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to Virtual E3 2021.
Oh man,
Take-Two, like many
some
organizations,
bougie-ass green screen in the back.
committed to and actively involved in numerous initiatives to enhance diversity, equity, and inclusion within our society and industry.
Just move your mic away from the speaker. That's why it's getting feedback.
It's a continuous process, and there is no one solution that can achieve that goal. Especially for
No, it
those
sounds better to me.
underserved and underrepresented individuals, there needs to be a continuum of activism and engagement.
This
with
seems very
educational
press
programs
conference-y.
serving as its core foundation. Beginning with children in elementary school, we have the ability
Let me
to let a
see if I
spark
put this up a bit.
creativity
Ah,
Continuing through middle
There you
and
go.
high school, we can support and nurture students during their formative years and increase the depth of their skills that can provide a pathway to attending one of the 400 plus colleges and universities within the United States that offer degrees in game
oh, he's using Zoom too.
Providing opportunities to attend these academic institutions, including need-based financial support, is also a critical component to helping end generational cycles of inequality. And while pursuing their creative and technical degrees, students can learn firsthand from industry leaders that share their experience, acumen, and passion through one-on-one mentoring and internships at our organization. Together, if our industry can execute this continuum, we will have invested meaningfully in the lives of the youth from these communities for more than a decade before they begin their professional journey. Diversity and inclusion make us a better industry for today, and most importantly, for tomorrow. It allows us to make better entertainment experiences that are authentic, culturally relevant, and reflective of the audiences that enjoy them. Today, we have brought together a few of our important partners who will share their organization's mission and role in this endeavor, as well as their insights on how we as an industry can continue to take these important steps together for the future. We hope that you find their work as inspiring as we do. It is now my pleasure to turn things over to my colleague, Tony Lagans, Director of Diversity and Inclusion for 2K, who will be the moderator for today's discussion.
Thanks, Alan. It's my pleasure to be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce my esteemed panelists today.
Oh man,
We're going
this
to
is
start off
not
with Jim
looking good.
Huntley. Jim Huntley is currently the professor and head of marketing at USC. Jim is a faculty advisor, and he's an executive producer for USC Games Expo and a co-founding partner of PACU Gaming. Next, we have Susanna Pollock. Susanna is the president of Games for Change, which is a nonprofit that empowers game creators and social innovators to drive real-world impact through games and immersive media. Next to Susanna, we have Gordon Bellamy. Gordon is a professor of practice of cinematographic arts at USC. He is also the head of USC Bridge Incubator, which is a program that helps to cultivate the next generation of leaders in the video game industry. And last, next to Gordon, we have Layla Shabir. Layla is the founder of Girls Make Games, which offers a series of summer camps, workshops, and game jams designed to inspire the next generation of designers, creators, and engineers. Welcome to all of you, great panelists, and thank you so much for joining our important discussion today. Now, I'd like to dive right in here, and Jim, I'm going to start with you.
Did I miss something? What is this the right press conference?
You mentioned something that was so important, and it was really just talking
I don't know if I
about
want to
the
watch this.
increasing role that diversity, equity, and inclusion it is playing in the video game industry today. So before we get into the big concepts that we're talking about here, let's just break some things down for our viewers.
Is this the reason nobody else is streaming this?
And talk about equity and diversity and why it's so important in the conversation about the video game industry today.
Absolutely. Equity and diversity has been a challenge for the gaming industry since its inception. It hasn't really changed very, very much over time. But I think the biggest change that people are seeing in the last 5 years of it in the modern era is the rationale that there's no excuse behind not having better equity and diversity in the industry.
I'm not saying what they're talking about isn't just this should be a conversation, but I didn't know this is what this was going to be about.
Is that companies are now looking to invest in getting more diversity in their ranks and getting more stories told from different points of view.
Yeah, nobody else is streaming this. I'm actually literally looking at everybody else.
So let's talk about just kind of the inequities and why is it so important to have these conversations. Talk about that whole aspect and just getting people in the right mindset to understand what's available for them as majors in this industry. Jim, talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So a lot of what we've been focusing on from a USC Games perspective is making sure that students of color, Black and Indigenous,
we're going to be
in
chat.
The least amount of representation.
If you guys want to have a conversation about this, we'll be here.
Various demographic groups.
We'll be around for the next stream.
We've been focusing on scholarships, but the challenge that we have, and I think the challenge that society and the industry has, is it starts earlier than that. There's a phrase from, I can't remember who to attribute it to, but there's a phrase that he used that I remember saying, the inequities of our past pay dividends into the future. And that sticks with me because the reality is if you don't have a great opportunity or access to computer science labs and specialized education in grade school and high school and junior high school, the odds of you having a great portfolio piece when it comes time to apply to a program like ours puts you at a deficit. And if that deficit keeps rolling on into the future, generation after generation, the gap between the ability to get into some of these slots in game design and not being able to get them gets wider and wider. So we need to do a better job as a society, and we are willing to do our part and help work with companies like Take-Two to lead the vanguard on how do we get students some opportunity from grade school? Like, how do we make sure they can see this as an option? Because when I, as a Black man, get in front of a small group of grade school students, and I say I work in the video game industry, you can see the eyes just their minds explode because they've never seen anyone like me and the videos they see on YouTube or other visitors to their classes and to their seminars. So it's important to show that we have a presence here, but it's also important to make sure that the students who look like us, who are 20 years, 30 years, 40 years behind us, also have the opportunities that we didn't in some cases to get a job in this industry.
Yes, thank you so much for your insight. So important there. Susanna, that really kind of speaks to a lot of the great work that you're doing in helping to reach this underserved community. Can you talk about the work that Games for Change is doing?
Sure. So our mission, as you said earlier, is to empower game designers and social innovators, right? To use games for social change. And we see our work with younger people as really inspiring the next generation, right? And so just what Jim was saying, like we're going as young as sixth grade, sometimes fifth grade, but trying to give young people, and mostly in Title I schools, so those are schools that qualify for free lunches, which often are representing the underserved communities, an opportunity to dive in deeply into this gaming industry, this experience they all love to do, and help them become creators of this content, not just consumers. And we've been finding that it's a program that we've been running called the Games for Change Student Challenge. We've been running it for the past 6 years. We've reached over 30,000 young people in middle and high school. And we not only give them an opportunity to learn how to make games, but we also combine that with civic engagement. So they have to think about how games can help make their communities better. So right from the start, we want to empower them to think about this really important medium, not only as something they love to do, but they actually can make. They're learning important 21st century and STEM skills that can help them regardless of what career path. But what we really hope to see happen is that they see a future for themselves and they see an opportunity, a pathway for them. And part of our program, an important part of it, is this idea of mentoring, and mentoring from near peers and also from people from the community. So as Jim says, it's so important they see themselves in the people that are coming to speak to them. So when we're in Los Angeles, for example, we can reach out to USC Games for game design students to come and speak to the kids, that we can bring people in from Riot or Activision or from Take-Two to come in and say, yes, this is what I do, and this is something for you. And we do the same thing in New York and working in Atlanta and Detroit. And I can tell you that students are coming back year on year, and we're seeing them use this program as like their college essay, or they're building their portfolio. And I love the idea that, if we can get to them at a young age, they spend their summers with Layla at Girls Make Games, and then they can go on and apply to college, and we're talking about this pipeline or this pathway for them. And so that's that role and what we hope to inspire.
I love what you said there, Suzanne. There's so many little nuggets that you just pulled out there. The different avenues you can have and career pathways there are in the gaming industry. Just the activity that you can have in terms of having mentorship and role models and representation, and just, having good gamers out there. So there's so many things that you talked about that I want to hit on. Let's just pull Layla into this conversation and just talk about the idea of mentorship and representation. Layla, talk about the workshops and the summer programs that you offer to girls. How does that help to increase the representation and the mentorship aspects that we've talked about?
Thanks so much for having me. I was on mute. This is 2021, still going on mute. But like Susanna said, I think it's really important to kind of pass that baton on. And I think we see this summer after summer, having created a place that's, for girls. We get this question a lot. Why do you need a space that's just for girls? There's so many programs out there that are open to everyone. But I think it's just so important to create that space because, like Jim talked about, it's so important to see people who are like yourselves. For many of the girls that come to camp, this is their first time walking into a room full of girls who love video games. They've been so accustomed to kind of being the only girl on their robotics team, or the only girl that went to a coding camp with their brother, and the girl who's fighting her brothers for the Xbox controller. So those are very common themes and stories. And I think it's important to kind of tie in not just the mentorship, but also the community. It's very important to walk into a room and feel like you're not an outsider. And the best way to do that is to show many more faces that look just like you. It's really validating to walk away, not just with the technical skills, but to feel like these are people that I'm going to, kind of encounter in 10, 15 years, and we'll be like professionals, because right now we're just kids making games, but we'll be professionals in a few years. And 7 years out for Girls Make Games, we're finally starting to see, these girls kind of make plans together to go to college and this year, I would say like the first time we got in like dozens of emails from families saying, you know, my daughter is now thinking of college and how do we get this portfolio going? How do we set that up? So I think touching on Jim's point too, there's so many challenges that, you know, people have to go through just to get everything right. You shouldn't have to rely on luck so much. So if you look at the women who are now excelling and thriving in the industry and you ask them their stories, so many things had to go right in their lives to finally end up in the industry. Many of whom ended up there accidentally, like me and even Tony. I think Tony and I touched on that earlier. But it shouldn't have to be luck or accident. We can actually intentionally create these pipelines. And I think it requires all of us working together, like everyone in this room, talking about what we're doing and how do we pass our students on from, you know, we start as young as 8, getting them onto the programs and then passing them on to the student challenge and then on to USC and then finally on to the industry. I think that's basically the magic formula to solving the problem that we're talking about today.
Yes, thank you for hitting on that pipeline challenge and actually solution. You really clearly laid it out there for us. I really, really enjoy that. And something else you mentioned is just like really opening this world of gaming to new, diverse, a pool and a spectrum of gamers. And how do we create those real pathways back into the gaming industry? Gordon, you've done a lot of work in just helping to create value where value was not seen in places in the gaming industry, specifically for the gay gaming professionals. Can you talk about how the representation and widening the spectrum of what gaming professional looks like and how your company and your role really accomplishes that?
Sure. So we have a mission which is focused on education, employment, expertise, and entrepreneurship. And the reason why is because alongside diversity and equity inclusion, there's a new word that's come up a lot, which is belonging, right? A feeling of belonging, of being default. And I know that people in their uniqueness do a lot of mental, socioeconomic, and sometimes social gymnastics before they get to be as good as they are, before they get a chance to participate in this panel or participate in our industry by and large. And I think the work that we all share is trying to disrupt some of those mental gymnastics, socioeconomic gymnastics, social gymnastics that young women, people of color, indigenous people, neurodiverse people need to do in order to be as great as they are, you know, to belong, you know, in the space. And sort of hearing, you know, what Layla's speaking to of a cohort, right, that treats each other as default, and where are we going to go now together collectively? The program, you know, Jim's putting in place, right, with the endowment honoring Lawson, where there's going to be cohorts of Black and Indigenous people, right, growing together. And the work that Susanna, you've been doing since before it was cool, okay? You were changing games, you know, making that dollar out of 15 cents before all of us. All of that work, you know, and with the support of corporations like Take-Two, right, is enabling us to move a generation forward. Specifically with GGP, we have a scholars program in partnership with Take-Two. Some go to USC, many go on to participate in Games for Change, and many have been girls who made games. And that's where we find ourselves intersecting, is at that college point of how do we take them towards professionalization? And then we hope to carry them through into employment, into being experts, right? Because that's the real challenge when you're trying to discover people. You don't want just to be entering, you want experts, right? And if things are going to really change, like this discussion, you need owners, right? Layla, owner. Susanna, owner. Jim, owner. All of you, owners of facets of your business, right? That is where we become the batter, not the frosting, right? Where the change is, you know, more than we can count, 2%, 3%, 1%. We aren't even the ones counting, right? We're still being counted, right? Until you're doing the counting, nothing has changed, right? I don't need to ask how many young ladies are in Girls Make Games. You're like, all of them, right? What is the gender balance of Games for Change? I didn't know all of it, right? These sort of systemic changes, like that is the work I think we all share. I think it's why we all made time today, right? I've been to every E3. I was a booth boy when I started, and I'm still here, right? 25, 26 years later, haven't missed one yet. So I hope that someone out there sees this and begins their path, right? And this is additive, that's why we're all here.
I appreciate that. Yes, exactly what you're saying. There's so much more that all of us can be doing. The accountability piece is really very important, Gordon. Thank you for bringing that up. I just want to lay this out there to all our panelists. What can corporations do to really set themselves up for success in the near future and grabbing this new talent, this talent out there that we need to capture to help us build better, more relevant, engaging video games? What can corporations do?
So I was thinking about this in particular as Gordon was talking about the scholarships that he puts forward. So having organizations, companies like Take-Two have to be visible to young people, not just because they're buying, they're downloading the games off of Xbox or PlayStation, but because they're there in front from the beginning. And so Take-Two has been part of our challenge since the beginning, offering scholarships to our grand prize winners. And I can tell you that that's a motivator for kids to participate, not just because there's a scholarship at the end, but it's because Take-Two is part of it. Like, it made us cool. Right. And I think it's that relationship at that young of an age that makes a connection for people. Is like, yeah, they want to hear what I have to say. Right. Like, they're here because this program exists and because I'm interested in doing it. And I think that kind of relationship with these kids, whether they're mentoring and coming into a classroom, they're volunteering at a game jam or judging games at the end of the competition, they're involved. And I think that it really has an impact on young kids' lives.
Yes, I love that.
I just want to add to what Suzanne's saying. I think that, and something that, we're talking about Take-Two, and thank you for having us, is making the success of Black people, of women, of queer people, of Indigenous people, neurodiverse people, a business goal. Plain the same way that the consumption, right, of content, right, get some downloadable skins, buy some NBA 2K, right, that's a business goal around which the business is aligned. And I feel as though if the expertise of women, Black people, neurodiverse, other populations was a business goal, then that would be the change. It'd be that simple. Like, oh, our business is more successful if there is more of this, right? And that's about people being of value versus just being valuable, which are two different things. There's lots of exceptional people, right, who are of value in spite of their circumstances. They're valuable, right? There's a difference between saying you're of value and that's a business goal in itself. And I think that's the real change, because it used to be, just real talk, it used to be about exceptionalism, right? And be like, oh, you're able to thrive under this duress, right? Isn't that cool? Versus, right, you are actually who we are, so we are going to cultivate you. That's who we are year round. That's what we look like, what we sound like, right? Who we are, right? And so as the lever moves more towards that, right? The same way, like, I have biases. I attended Harvard College, so I'm of value, right? There's value in that, right? I'm treated that way in some circles. If the same lens was put onto women, onto brown people, Black people, queer people, then there'd be no, as the kids say, no cap on the change that could take place.
Right. And that just speaks to being deliberate with our diversity, inclusion, equity practices. Corporations really have to take that accountability and, like you said, do what's right in that spectrum, in that conversation, looking at value from different sources and kind of recalibrating our minds to that. But like you guys have said, it takes time. It takes starting earlier in the pipeline. I love that you just call that out. What other things can corporations do that are just different than what we've been doing in the past, perhaps? What would you recommend?
I would even add to what Gordon just said. The looking at this challenge as a business challenge is key. That's what between the inspiration of the social justice marches from last summer and really talking to our chair, Danny Bilson, who said that, hey, if you were going to tackle this issue, this giant generational issue as a business problem, what would you do? And that flipped the light switch on for me. Well, of course, like any business problem, what are my challenges? I've got gaps in my supply chain, if you will. So how do I fill those gaps in my supply chain? And really working your way backwards in a way where you're putting objectives, strategies, and tactics in place to achieve those goals from a business perspective. You're going to see outcome when it's not just, hey, here's a check and good luck with charity X. It's going to be more of, okay, here's a check. This is what we're hoping to see. Let's measure along the way and see if we're seeing progress on that. And it's the measurement of progress and adjusting in real time based on the data that you're getting back. That's where you're going to meet. That's where you're going to see the gap start to close in a meaningful way and be able to point out to other people in the industry, like, hey, this is what we can all do together. What if we scale this effort up and really had an impact on society as a whole? That mindset is really going to be what changes the game.
So I like to think about it as like a pie. You know, when we think about from like a corporate strategy, we always think about there's a piece of the pie and everyone gets a little piece of the pie. But I think the way we have to approach this is really the pie is not a fixed size. I think by including more people, the pie gets bigger. So it's not a fixed size that we're trying to all get a piece of, but by including more people, you know, in the industry who, by becoming creators of this medium, we actually expand the medium, expand it beyond just entertainment. And I think that speaks really heavily to me as a problem solver. Is like when I look at video games, it's such an underutilized tool for social change. And I think like that I can see Susanna kind of has been on the forefront of that. And coming in as an outsider to the games industry, I was just kind of blown away that, oh my God, you can do so much. Like 9 out of 10 kids play video games. You know, not 9 out of 10 boys, 9 out of 10 kids. We're talking about literally changing perceptions and inspiring and educating generation after generation. And yet that power rests in the hand of like a select few. And I think when you think about it, not just from a corporate responsibility, but as a social responsibility, like what are we putting out there for our kids to consume? I think we need to bring in pretty much everyone, anyone and everyone who's interested in building a future together in that. So between the pie and the corporate responsibility, I feel like there's a lot that gets lost. Like I think there's a big dichotomy between these are people that are doing good and these are people that are self-serving, but it doesn't work like that. We have to work together and everyone does kind of go between what's good for me and what's good for everyone, you know, so.
Thank you for bringing that concept up, Layla. The codependency. We are all community members in this pipeline, and we have to be active, deliberate in our processes, in our systems, how we tackle this problem. Before we end this conversation, there's tons of questions that we have that we want to ask you. So I'm going to pause right now and give our esteemed questionnaires a chance to ask their questions that are top of mind related to our conversation today. So we're going to start it off with some questions from our other video game industry experts here. We've got Carrie, she's an executive producer from Private Division. We also have Vanetta, who's a director of talent acquisition with Take-Two, and Nir, he's the head of mobile for Take-Two. So go ahead and fire it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. The first question is for Layla, but certainly open to having the rest of our panelists answer the question. But at the beginning of your career, did you ever imagine being a leader within an industry that is predominantly male dominated? And what is your advice for other young women that are interested in taking a similar path to where you are today?
Thank you, Juanetta. I don't think I really envisioned being in a male-dominated industry, although I did envision being in a male-dominated world, because I grew up in the Middle East and I was painfully aware of being a girl, and how my life was going to turn out to be different from my male peers or my brothers or my cousins or any of that. I was fortunate that my parents were very supportive and they wanted me to pursue whatever dream I wanted. But I think having that mindset and coming from a world that was very much male dominated already prepared me for, hey, whatever I end up doing, there's going to be more boys or men than me. I think the piece of advice that I would really give girls is to honestly not think about your gender when you think about what you want to pursue, because it's all about you specifically. You might end up liking things that people, even your age, your geographic location, your educational background, or your family might not have heard of or even thought of. And that is all the things that I ended up doing were things that didn't match anything that I had seen in my own environment, but I just kind of pursued what I wanted to. And then two is to kind of use a very selective hearing. I think you have to kind of develop selective hearing, listen to the people that care about you, that love you, and encourage you in being more of who you are, and diminish the voices of people who say you can't do things because it's never been done, or that's not how it is, or that's not how the world works. The way the world works is based on the world that we build, and we're continually building a new world. So it doesn't matter how things are done now, they're going to be done a different way as you grow up, and you can be part of building that world. So those would be like my two pieces of advice for girls, is to just pursue what you want and, develop selective hearing.
All right. My question is for Susanna, but also open to anyone else who would like to answer. And I think Gordon kind of hit it earlier when he said that, most of us didn't have a lot of examples or opportunities. I'm in that boat. I didn't have any programs and anyone telling me that I could do this, and definitely had to, not necessarily an accident, but really had to work in a different way, harder than most. So my question, Susanna, for you is, could you share an example of how your program has impacted someone that has participated, or, a few people?
Sure. So as I said, our program is 6 years old in New York City. We're a bit younger in the other cities that we're operating in, and there are opportunities now that kids all over the country can participate. But we saw in New York a very particularly strong cohort. We're actually in over 125 schools right now in New York City, and there are some rock star teachers that have encouraged their kids to participate, their participants, year on year on year. And that, to me, is certainly the beginning of getting this kind of program off the ground, and particularly in schools where students usually aren't offered this kind of experience. So one, having the teachers find value and really and work to and making it a part of an annual program within their school system has also allowed students to continue with the program year on year. There's one young woman in particular who won, I think she won the our theme category the first time round. When she participated as a sophomore. The junior year, she won again. And by the senior year, she was a grand prize winner in New York City. And I hear that she then followed on with a full scholarship to NYU Game Center. Right. And it was just amazing. And I just remember she was invited to speak at the Games for Change Festival after she won. It must have been the second year. I don't think it was the third year. And she came, and we were having a conversation about, the program, and she was invited to speak on it. And her father came with her and followed her around the entire 2 days she was there with a camera, recording her experience in this, professional environment, not only when she was speaking, but when she was sitting and watching the other people on stage. And it was so awesome to see that kind of support within her family. And I'm like, all right, you've got educators supporting this young woman, this pathway. She's got her family. And actually, since she graduated, I've seen other kids in her family come through the program. But it takes that kind of multiple supports from different directions to really support this young woman who is a woman of color from Brooklyn, who found her path, right? And she got the right supports, and she got there. And now I also understand that she's launched her own studio and is raising money, on Kickstarter. She's remarkable.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that story. That's so cool.
Nir, do you have a question for our panelists?
Yeah, hi, I do. So my question is to Gordon. I'm looking at LGBTQ representation in gaming. I've been in gaming for more than 12 years, and it feels to me that representation is a bit low than what you would expect, what I see in tech in other sectors. Do you have some data or some thoughts about that? Is that the fair estimation? And if so, why is that? And what are the main challenges that LGBTQ individuals face in this industry?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you a little history here. So when we started GGP about 15 years ago, which is not that long ago in corporate times, queer people only existed on an anonymous mailing list, anonymous to each other.
That's
okay. Because employment safety, which is still a concern globally, not to mention just safety, was a #1 concern which all of us lived with. So, even back then, weird flex, but I had designed Madden Football, had already sold a company to Activision, employment safety. So that is the #1 reason why. And just in this new recent history, have we begun to build the trust and value in each other so as to aggregate and to even acknowledge each other, okay? And to build systemic ties to companies like Take-Two and others to move from hiding from the industry, right? Escaping from the industry, to affinity, right? Right? To employee resource groups and corporate leaders like Tony existing, right? And we're moving closer to being a business resource. And so in other technology areas, that path is further along, where it is like to say in the batter, that the queer identity is of value, and there's customers, there's of course creators, there's of course business leaders and owners, of all walks. And in the optimum business, you would cultivate, all types of people. As a game craft, we are still in generation 1. You even asking this question here, you are a wild pioneer. You are the out there with your machete chopping down bamboo to even ask this question, which presumes that LGBT people would be employed, okay, and then in communication with each other, right? In communication with each other across different companies, and in any sort of ongoing concern. So welcome. Thank you for asking. For those of you at home, we have a Discord and a Facebook that you can all join and participate at any time, or you can reach out to me directly on Twitter, Gordon Bellamy. Wherever you may be on or off your path as an LGBTQIA person or an ally, right? Because I think that's something we've all discovered. And I think whatever population you are part of, whether it be across gender or race or expression identity, is that you don't have to be a member to care, okay? You don't gotta be a member to say this is an important issue. And in fact, a lot of the work that we do at a corporate level is saying, hey, you don't have to do all the work, right? You know how to push the rock that's sitting on you. We're gonna help you push that rock that's on you. It's not on me, but I can help push, right? Because I can see it. It's on you. And so asking these questions, corporate support, time, right? 3 T's, time, talent, and treasure, will move this discussion forward. I hope that answers your question there, but otherwise just get at me. I can, tell you more. And anyone out there who's watching, we can tell you more in greater detail.
Gordon, I know your company has some things going on in the few months.
Oh,
Can you talk
sure.
about some of the activities you guys have?
Sure. So we have most of our content now, in addition to our scholars program and our community service that we do with Take Two, is streaming. So we stream front page of Twitch and we bring it to YouTube, content around equity, inclusion, belonging, and not just LGBT. We just had our second Indigenous game creators panel yesterday. Big hit, because you know what? Indigenous creation has always been here. In August, we're going to be doing our first GGP honors, which is going to be honoring the best in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in our craft. So we're going to be lifting up the people who do the work, right? Every day in our ERGs, in our executive suites, like Dr. Liggins, right? These people need to be cultivated as well, right? The same way that we cultivate engineers, artists, and other things that we value, right? Things that we value need to be cultivated. So we're going to be getting to do that work August. Tune in, front page of Twitch. It's going to be a mood. Hope you're all there.
Awesome. Thank you. We probably have time for one more question, so let's go for it. Who's got their last burning question for our panelists?
Oh, I have several questions.
Burn.
One, we'll just speak. I have to come from the affinity group, ERG, BRG perspective. So Gordon, thank you for touching on that. So this question is for both Jim and Gordon, as someone that represents a member of an ERG as well as a leader of an ERG. What advice would you give ERGs, affinity groups, BRGs that are either just starting out or those that are established in organizations that are looking for ways to further embed themselves into the business, so that better versus pricing that you're talking about?
Also, I mean, to add to that, I think the something that a few of us have touched on earlier is an old adage from the business world: you can't manage what you can't measure. If you don't have a way to see how your progress is evolving over a continuum, you're kind of just going, well, I think something's working, let's just keep doing that. And business people, myself being one of them, don't respond well to that. It's just okay, let's just keep investing in a thing that I don't know the results of. You need to be able to go back and say, hey, this year we were here, this following year we were here. Here's the, not only have we seen a positive impact on the investment or good ROI, but we also recognize the fact that the partner and partners that we're working with are making moves and making investments into the future that they're saying that they want to see. The positive feedback loop of being able to say, here's data that shows that what we're doing is having an impact on our objectives, and rewarding that partner or those partners for that investment and for that support. That's really key to building a positive feedback loop around investing in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, what Jim said, but I'd still say make it mobile. God, if you could move that needle like 0.2%, anything, you can't get cut. You can't get cut then, right? There's no way, no, because they budget's tight when you're moving that needle 0.2%, right?
No, the scale at which we all operate, it's pretty staggering when you think about it. When you aggregate how much revenue and profit goes and gross profit goes in the games business, for a meaningful moving of the needle of DEI, comparatively speaking, it's not a huge amount of money. It's to have a really big demonstrable impact, measurable impact. If we aggregate our dollars and really focus on some key objectives, we can really move the needle in a way that's going to, frankly, when you start seeing things work, people get excited. It worked. Let's keep doing it. Let's keep doing it. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why the Lawson Fund is what it is. It's an endowment because we want to see it have an impact in the aggregate over time, over generations, and support students for decades to come. Not just have it be this fiscal year, what can we do?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
One more thing, just to let it go, is just keep saying Black out loud. Right? Let's get back to Black is beautiful. We've been residing in Black Lives Matter for a long time, and we need to be back to like Black and proud and Black and beautiful. And so your existence, right? And saying it and saying positive outcomes after the word Black is meaningful each and every day that you can do it in your ERG.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you.
Good question. We've got time for more. What else do we have?
All right, I'll go if we have time for more. Layla, how have you been able to actually connect with the people in the community to bring awareness for your programs? Like, how do you actually gather people, to participate, and especially like in the very beginning?
Oh my gosh. So the first camp in 2014, we literally like barged into a maker fair with flyers and we were just going around and being like, you look like you would love video games because you're playing with robots right now. So come to our camp. But I think it's pretty much primarily been word of mouth originally, but then when we ended up partnering with the game studios and game companies, that really helped elevate the program and the PR. I think Susanna touched on that. It's like it actually legitimized us and then kind of made us really cool. Like, hey, you can go make games at these game studios. You can actually make a game at Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, Take-Two. You can go into their offices, meet the developers, and make these games. And I think that cool factor has kind of really helped us out. When it comes to speakers and people who want to mentor and be involved, that's been a lot easier because, a lot of our teachers end up being college students themselves, and they come back and they'll say things like, I wish this program existed when I was younger. It sucks I couldn't go to it, but at least I get to be a part of it and give back to the kids. And then same thing for mentors and speakers. There's so much interest in wanting to give back and wanting to welcome new voices into the industry. We haven't really had to do a lot of pushing. In fact, we get pulled in a lot of directions. I was talking to my team the other day. I was like, this is a very fortunate problem to have where we're getting pulled in 100 directions because we're needed in 100 directions, as opposed to us telling people that, hey, this is important, pay attention, and, look at what we're doing. So I would say it's been very organic and really the tide is turning. We're building a new industry. We're building on the industry that we have, but we're also building a new part of the industry together. So it's really exciting.
Thank you. Thanks, Layla. And thank you to our panelists. You guys have been very inspirational, very thought-provoking, and have left us with a lot of great tidbits to take away, to take back to our corporations and our respective organizations to really make a deliberate impact in our community that we're building and this whole world of diversity and equity and inclusion in the video game industry. So thank you all. Thank you, the viewers, for joining, and have fun at the virtual E3 conference.
I think ever since Mega Man X, I've just loved
Okay, so I was muted. I was wondering what was happening. Can you hear me now? In any case, am I still muted?
No, the people can hear you.
Okay. I was like, all right. So yeah, what I was saying was that I know that this wasn't what people were expecting. They're expecting trailers because we know that that group created some really good stuff. But in general, even though it's a topic that's like taboo and it makes you uncomfortable, it is an important message. Thank you for letting me know that you couldn't hear me also. That was really important. But yeah, what I was saying when I was muted was we will be coming back with some more stuff. The next thing that I had said is it's 2:02 p.m. here. It's Eastern time. Our next thing, I believe, is at 3:15. So that's in like about an hour. So we're going to take like a little recess. It should be Indie Showcase. I believe it will be trailers like what we're used to for E3. But once again, anything that you heard, if you take anything away from anything that you heard today, please at least take away the fact that the reason why they're having this conversation is because if you don't invest in your community and if you don't invest in teaching younger people that, you know, they can learn how to make games, then eventually it will still be what we're in now. People canceling games because they have two women in a relationship or they have a black person playing characters that they assume should be white, you know? So the whole point was in inclusivity in general across the means, teaching the young generation in the community in efforts to show things on screen so we can see ourselves. So everyone can see themselves. But yeah, we will be back, as I said, in about an hour-ish with the Indie Showcase. And I hope you guys can come back with us. Okay?
Yeah, for sure, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.